Snow White is officially Disney's biggest box office disaster of all time. And with the second weekend rolling in now as we speak, the train wreck is only getting worse and worse.
Have you ever seen a fairy tale turn into a real-life PR nightmare? That's exactly what happened when one of Disney's most cherished classics was revamped for modern audiences, only to unravel under the weight of controversy, confusion, and a star who couldn't seem to stay out of the headlines. This is the saga of a remake that left moviegoers scratching their heads, Disney executives searching for answers, and fans wondering what went wrong. Let's dive in and uncover the twist that made this seemingly can't-miss project implode in spectacular fashion. The original Snow White isn't just another nostalgic trip down Disney Lane. It was the studio's first full-length animated feature, debuting all the way back in 1937. At the time, it was a groundbreaking marvel, proving that audiences would sit through a feature-length cartoon filled with musical numbers, enchanting scenery, and a naive yet lovable princess. This film didn't simply amuse children. It astonished adults, inspired generations of animators, and laid the foundation for an entertainment empire that would dominate film for decades to come. Decades later, Disney noticed a new opportunity, remaking its own animated hits as live-action spectacles. From Cinderella to The Lion King, these updates brought in staggering box office returns, fueled partly by nostalgia and partly by curiosity. When whispers began that Snow White, the fairy tale that started it all, would receive a live-action makeover, the buzz was electric. People were curious how the studio would preserve the innocence of the original while inserting a modern sensibility. After all, times had changed dramatically since the 1930s, and the simple story of a girl and 7 dwarf friends was bound to get a 21st century twist. But behind the curtain, many wondered if meddling too much with the classic's DNA risked alienating loyal fans. Disney executives, at least on the surface, believed it was a safe bet, a timeless tale plus a potentially star-making turn for a fresh face. What could possibly go wrong? As it turns out, a lot. Thanks to a perfect storm of questionable creative decisions, a PR onslaught, and some of the most polarizing publicity any Disney star has encountered in recent memory. The actress stepping into Snow White's shoes was none other than Rachel Zegler, fresh off a prominent role in a high-profile musical that skyrocketed her into Hollywood's line of sight. Critics lauded her vocal talents, her stage presence, and her potential to inject fresh life into Disney's older stories. Early footage or teases from set had fans initially hopeful. She had the singing chops, the acting skill, and a certain youthful energy that could give Snow White a bold, contemporary edge. Those close to production say that, at first, everyone was thrilled. There was a sense of excitement about how she might reinterpret the iconic role, not as a passive princess, but as a resourceful heroine relevant to current audiences. Promotional images hinted at vibrant costumes, bigger musical numbers, and a grand spectacle. But it didn't take long for small cracks to show. In the early days of the press cycle, reporters noticed that Rachel Zegler seemed unusually candid about her thoughts on the original film, calling it outdated or implying that Snow White needed more depth. While some applauded her conviction, others felt uneasy. Sure, a modern reimagining can be fun, but the blunt dismissal of a cherished piece of film history began raising eyebrows. As she spoke more, that murmur of unease grew louder. And soon enough, tension between eager anticipation and skeptical doubt swelled, setting the stage for one of the biggest cinematic meltdowns in Disney's recent history. Press tours are make-or-break moments for any blockbuster. They can build hype, reassure fans, and shine a glowing light on the cast. But in this case, every interview seemed to pour fuel on a growing fire. Rachel started describing the 1937 classic as weird, mocking the idea of a princess relying on a prince, and joking that the film's plot was too simplistic for modern tastes. While Disney's intention might have been to champion a stronger, more self-sufficient heroine, the public reaction to her dismissive tone was anything but supportive. The studio found itself scrambling to balance a pro-feminist message with respect for the original's legacy. Instead of generating excitement for a modern spin, many longtime Disney fans felt attacked, like they were being told that loving the old movie was naive. Social media, already volatile, blasted Rachel for biting the hand that fed her. Clips of her interviews were shared far and wide with scathing commentary, suggesting she was undermining Disney's brand by insulting its earliest masterpiece. Inside Hollywood circles, talent agents and PR experts started murmuring that Rachel's approach was a cautionary example of how not to speak about a franchise you've been hired to lead. Even some who believed the 1937 version could use an update said there were more respectful ways to share that perspective. But the more people criticized her, the more determined she seemed to double down, fueling an avalanche of memes, blogs, and reaction videos that painted her as out of touch. Unfortunately, that was just the start. The moment the film's trailer dropped, it became one of the most disliked trailers online. For a studio used to generating hype, the swift and brutal backlash was a red flag. Viewers complained about the visual style. Some called it dull and lifeless compared to the colorful vibrancy of the classic animation. Others zeroed in on the absence of key elements that made the original so endearing, questioning why the dwarfs were replaced with random woodland companions or why the prince appeared to be a minor afterthought. Critics, who typically reserve judgment until a full screening, couldn't ignore the tidal wave of negative reactions. Whispers of a box office bomb started circulating, and word on the street was that Disney executives were scrambling behind the scenes, desperate to recapture goodwill. Yet, Rachel's social media posts appeared oblivious to the growing controversy. In one infamous instance, she shared footage of herself in a nearly empty theater, giggling as though she'd scored a private screening. To many fans, it felt like she was taunting them or celebrating a flop. Memes exploded overnight, showcasing the video as proof that she was either clueless, overconfident, or both. Suddenly, it wasn't just about whether Snow White would succeed. It was about whether a star had torpedoed her own film with ill-chosen words and questionable public behavior. Hollywood insiders whispered that Rachel's career trajectory might be permanently altered, all because of a few unscripted remarks. Meanwhile, Disney's financial analysts had bigger worries. Rumor was the production budget, plus marketing, had soared, leaving the film in dangerous territory if audiences stayed away in droves. As fan outrage built, stories emerged of extensive reshoots, cost overruns, and frantic last-minute editing. Some sources said the dwarf's absence was originally intended to sidestep outdated tropes, but the studio then waffled on that decision, half introducing a mystical group of characters that confused viewers. Others whispered about significant script rewrites aimed at toning down the message-driven approach and leaning more on fantasy charm. But the problem was timing. By the time these changes were considered, the PR damage had already been done, thanks in large part to the leading actress's public statements. Meanwhile, everyone in the entertainment industry, from producers at rival studios to freelance bloggers, was talking about Rachel Zegler's meltdown. Rumors swirled that she was quietly dropped from other Disney projects, including a high-profile voice cameo in a Pixar sequel. Another claim surfaced that she'd been set to star in a new Pirates of the Caribbean reboot, only to be quietly removed when higher-ups realized how polarizing she'd become. Whether these rumors were true or not, it was clear that damage control was failing. Disney typically likes to keep its stars reined in, especially when representing a beloved brand. Yet here was a PR nightmare unfolding almost in real time, fueled by a star who seemed unrepentant. By now, even people who had no strong feelings about Snow White were tuning in for the spectacle of a corporate giant grappling with what seemed to be an unstoppable fiasco. Then came the actual release. If the empty seats in the theater had seemed like a joke during previews, it became a stark reality once the film officially hit theaters. Disappointed fans posted photos of half-vacant auditoriums, while box office analysts revised their predictions downward week after week. Critics who bothered to see the film found it lacking the classic Disney magic. Some said it felt like a half-hearted attempt to remake a classic, while also preaching about modern themes, without ever capturing the warmth that made the 1937 original endure for generations. One of the biggest complaints was that the story had lost its fairy tale wonder in the process of being modernized. The lack of the 7 iconic dwarfs, replaced by odd forest creatures that confused more than they delighted, stood out as a glaring misstep. Even the updated romance angle, or near absence of it, felt forced, failing to inspire the uplift or chemistry audiences crave in a big Disney musical. People left theaters more baffled than enchanted. Financially, Snow White's box office receipts were disastrous. While some defenders tried to blame other factors, like the general state of theaters or competition from other releases, it became evident that the film's reputation was so toxic that not even Disney's marketing machine could salvage it. The meltdown was complete. Huge budget, dismal returns, and a star whose social media posts became more memes than movie promotion. Media outlets began labeling it one of the worst live-action updates in the studio's history, ranking it right alongside infamous misfires that nobody wanted to remember. So, where does that leave everyone involved? For Disney, The Meltdown stands as a glaring reminder that tampering too heavily with a cherished classic can ignite fierce pushback, especially if the publicity suggests contempt for the original's legacy. Studios must thread the needle between modernization and respect, especially when a property has over 8 decades of goodwill behind it. And if the lead actor publicly criticizes the very thing fans hold dear, the backlash can overshadow everything else. As for Rachel Zegler, Hollywood might still embrace a comeback if she demonstrates humility and chooses projects that highlight her genuine talent, while avoiding landmines on press tours. Audiences are famously forgiving when they sense real growth or contrition. But at least for now, The Meltdown remains the defining chapter of her career, demonstrating how quickly a star can go from promising newcomer to industry cautionary tale. Ultimately, this fiasco taught Disney and anyone else paying attention a crucial lesson. Never underestimate the emotional bond people have with their favorite stories. When you promise a fresh take on a revered classic, viewers want to feel that their memories are valued, not dismissed as outdated nonsense. Otherwise, you risk turning a beloved fairy tale into a cautionary tale about self-inflicted PR disasters, empty theaters, and a once golden brand name tarnished by a single misguided remake.